Juan, there am I. Okay, very good. Okay. Anyway, hello. I know some of you, but not all of you. So I'm Virginia Dominguez. I will be moderating this. Let me say a few things about the today, and also in some ways about me, but not a lot about me. I a few years ago, actually, I think I realized this morning it was 6 years ago. We started these webinars under the WCAA, and Clara Saraiva was always the one doing this. They were practically monthly, maybe every 5 or 6 weeks in some cases. We switched a couple of years ago to have these webinars be WAU webinars, World Anthropological Union webinars, and we sort of decided that we would alternate between WCAA person, World Council of Anthropological Associations, and the IUAES, the International Union for Anthropological and Ethnological Sciences. And for a while there, it was me and Clara doing these, maybe every other month. And then when Clara became head of the WCAA, Gabriel Nicely, who's here, took over and did a wonderful job last time. So Gabriel Jan Darong, I don't know. I guess we can't see you. It's a very nice picture of you, Gabriel, but it's very nice to see you anyway. I
There
am.
is. There he
There
is.
he is. There you're smiling. There you go. Thank you.
Hello, Gabriel.
Anyway,
I'll
yes.
see you tomorrow morning.
Yeah, that's very good. Anyway, we Gabriel and I are now sort of alternating. We organize and we moderate one every couple of months, and it varies on topics. But I realize it's been 6 years, so we've done quite a few of these. As you know, they are free and open to everyone. We have a number of people here, but we also have a number of people who basically listen to the recording, etc. So let me say just a couple of things. I asked all sorts of folks on the various committees to choose a topic. Mentioned several possibilities, but in the end, I chose towards an anarchist anthropology, partly because it intrigued me, and partly because uh, uh, I think the co-organizers, especially, presented a very interesting thing about the commission, the IUAES Commission that they organized, that I think was the most recent one we accepted. So I think it would be very interesting to talk about all sorts of things the way we have usually done this. I don't know how many of you have done some. I've listened to some of these before. We're doing a little bit of a variation on it. So I have actually asked three speakers, not four or five, three speakers. I've been working with the Commission on Anarchist Anthropology. I've asked three speakers to speak, not really to give papers, but we have usually in the past had sort of two rounds, 5 or 6 minutes each. I think I have basically asked the speakers to speak just for a few minutes and definitely not over 10. But then when we do sort of a second round, I think I would like to have them have priority, but also have the people who are listening ask questions, even things that you think might be a very dumb question. But I think that's very good. We have speakers today from South Africa. That's Muggsy, Andrew Muggsy Spiegel. We know him as Muggsy. So some of you may not realize that his first name is Andrew. Betty Albernas, Elizabeth Albernas, who's one of the organizers of the co-heads of the IUAES Commission on Anarchist Anthropology, and Norihisa, where are you now? Oh, well, I guess Norihisa, right here. All right. Who is originally from Japan, but who is speaking to us from Mexico, where he has been for several years. I will do proper introductions a little later, but I wanted you to know at least a few things about these folks. Monksy in particularly is now retired, but nobody would know that. You officially retired from the university, but very active in IUAES, WOW, WCIA, in all sorts of ways. But it's actually in his capacity as a scholar researcher that we invite him here. I will do a very proper introduction a little later on. But here I wanted to say, for people who don't know, he has a lot of experience doing research on labor migration, kinship dynamics, poverty, urban housing policy, urban water and sanitation management. I know about that, many people don't, as well as racism, essentialism, identitarianism, and overviews of South African anthropology. Elizabeth Alvarez is, as I said, in Brazil, but actually co-chair of the Commission on Anarchist Anthropology and Autonomy Studies. I guess that's the full name. She is currently a postdoc in the anthropology department in Rio, at the Universidade Federal Fluminense in Rio de Janeiro, Brazil. And she coordinates a research group on illegalism. So I'd love to hear more about that. Norihisa is, as I said before, was born in Japan, actually, lived in Japan for a long time, and even got his first university degree from Osaka, his Bachelor of Arts degree. But since 2013, he has been in Mexico, where he studied for both a master's and a PhD in Latin American Studies at UNAM, Universidad Nacional Autónoma de México, University National Autonomous University of Mexico, and he sort of focuses on historical processes and actual trends in the dismantling and transformation of rural areas in the Asia Pacific. So I will do a little more introduction later on. But Elizabeth Alvarez, did you want to actually say a few things about the commission beyond what I just said?
Yes, Virginia, thank you. Well, first, I want to thank the invitation, Virginia. So it's a pleasure to be here at the World Anthropological Union webinars, my first time. So thank you. I'm happy to be here with my colleagues from the Commission, Magsi, like this dinosaur of South African anthropology, and Nori, which is a very good friend, very dedicated researcher in our commission that is also doing a very interesting work. So the IUAES Commission of Anarchist Anthropology and Autonomy Studies, yes, is a long name. And we have a great challenge ahead of us too. So it's a community of researchers, I would say, that share the interest in rethinking power and domination in contemporary capitalist society, adopting the colonial marginal perspective focus, and to build what we say it's a libertarian theoretical approach to the phenomenon of social organization in anthropology. So as I said, it's a big challenge. It's a long run, but also something I run that also stretches back, as I'm going to try to show in the history of anthropology. So we do that through ethnographic work, with what anarchist theory calls autonomies, which are like forms of life that claim the right, or they actually currently organize themselves based on the principles of self-determination, self-government, and self-regulation. So today, Virginia, I expect to talk about that path towards an anarchist anthropology, thinking about the contribution of anarchists to anthropology, but also vice versa. I think we contaminate the terms of this affiliation, contaminates themselves, and I want to talk about this contribution, mutual contributions. But also, like I said, to show that the path towards is also the path backwards in anthropology, to revisit the fragments of anarchist anthropology and also the reassessing the disciplines theory, history, and vocation through an anarchist perspective or through anarchist lens. If I can say something like just to open the discussion, you think I can, or should I stop now?
Well, you can say something, but I don't know that we are going to have discussion right now. We're going to hear the three of you first.
Okay.
And then,
So I'm
okay.
going to say something important, like just to close this opening remarks, which is like, I think we have many things to discuss, like in the perspective of methodology, the perspective of regaining epistemological ambition from ethnography. So the possibility of producing theory from ethnography. But I think I would start like provoking people with another challenge that we have that at first, and it's a big challenge, to demystify the negative association between anarchy and disorder. So it's actually like a historical dated construction, and it ended up consolidating in society, and the anarchists became the evil guys in Mission Impossible movies, and all sorts of like stigmatization and misinformation. Like me myself, I joined the Anarchist Commission during the WAU meeting, NAC Congress in Johannesburg in 2024. Me myself, I joined thinking when they said, like, you want to join the Anarchist Anthropology Commission? And I said, of course, I'm going to be the black bloc of the commission. So immediately my first impetus was to like think about violence and the work of black blocs, like fighting this in public demonstrations. But actually, like my the co-chair of the commission, also with me, Cassio Brancaleone's book say, anarchism is order. It's like a Proudhonian, like the Pierre-Joseph Proudhon, the father of anarchist political theory. But it's a principle that it's an understanding that anarchism, it's the perfect, according to Proudhon, the perfect match in between the principle of authority and freedom. So that's very important to think about things like today, to think about like democracy and to think about what's happening around the world with migrants, with authoritarianism, because we depart from this idea that authority's freedom should be subjected, not complete freedom of authority, so authority over freedom, but freedom over authority. We believe that that's how we can like find a true equality and the true end of what we call like domination and oppression, all sorts, all forms, based on state, based on the market, and based on gender, based on race, and other, and based on place, the place you live, etc., or where you come from. And that's our I think that's our overall perspective. And yeah, I'm done.
Great.
Thank you, Virginia.
Thank you. A couple of business things, I guess I call them that. These webinars usually last about an hour and a half, but they may go over a little bit, so maybe up to about an hour, 45 minutes. But that's usually when we have 4 or 5 speakers and they do 2 rounds and there's never enough time for discussion. So what we want here actually is for the 3 speakers to say something and not just about how and why the commission was organized, but actually substantive, so we can have a discussion. And please don't ask questions then. You can put them in the chat, but we will have lots of time for discussion afterwards. So we will have the 3 speakers. I will introduce each. Magzi, Bette Elisabetta, and Norhisa, in that order. We usually go from east to west. It mostly has to do with the time zone. So it's not particularly bad in this case, but we've sometimes had folks in China, Japan, Korea, etc., and it's very late at night. So we do that. it would be great if people could use the chat feature here to also indicate where they're from, so we have some sense of at least who's participating here. But with that said, let me just go ahead and introduce Muggsy. You there, Muggsy? Yeah. Okay. So he sent me something a little longer than I thought I was going to get, but it doesn't matter. So I think all of this is very important. His first name, as you know, is really Andrew, but he has gone by Muggsy for years. He is Emeritus Associate Professor of Anthropology at the University of Cape Town in South Africa. He was head of the department for 10 years there, and subsequently the Faculty of Humanities Director of Postgraduate Studies. His ethnographic research and publications include work on things I mentioned before, Southern African labor migration from both rural and urban perspectives, kinship dynamics in the context of oscillating migration, poverty and urban housing policy, urban water and sanitation management, as well as racism, essentialism, identitarianism, and what he wrote, similar contentious South African and global practices and concepts, and also overviews of South African anthropology. He served for 15 years on the IUAES Executive Committee. I mentioned your long service in a lot of these, but 15 years is really quite some time. He served for 15 years on the IUAES Executive Committee, including 9 of them as treasurer, for which we are also particularly grateful. And again, for some months in 2023, when he was interim deputy head of the IUAES Council of Commissioners. He also served for 4 years in each of the WCAA Organizing Committee and the WAU Steering Committee. WAU, as most of you know, is World Anthropological Union. WCAA is the World Council of Anthropological Associations. He was previously president of Anthropology Southern Africa, president of the local association, ASNA, and is presently co-editor-in-chief of the ASNA Journal. He is a member of the WCAA Advisory Committee, along with me, I should say, and a member of the WCAA Task Team on Anthropological Values, as well as co-chair since 2022 of the IUAES Commission for the Study of Difference, Dissemination, and Marginalization. He has co-authored, edited, and co-edited 10 books, has guest edited 5 journal special issues, and has authored or co-authored some 70 journal articles and book chapters. You wrote something for me. I don't know. Do you want me at the end? Nah. Okay. Go ahead, Margaret.
No, not necessary.
Cool.
Okay. Thank you, Virginia, and thank you for the invitation to contribute to this discussion, which I'm not sure I'm the right person to be here. I'm not really well positioned to or equipped to talk on the topic. On the dinosaurs, Betty said, I'm not the oldest one here in Southern Africa, but I have kind of been around for a while. But anarchist anthropology has never been an area which I've been particularly engaged in, but fascinated by the idea. So let me begin with what I've got to say. I must ask you please to bear with me if you're familiar with David Graeber's Fragments of an Anarchist Anthropology, since much of what I will say is drawn from that insightfully provocative, but now over 20-year-old set of thoughts. And thinking about today's presentation and how I'd approach it, I realized to address the topic, as I understood it, we needed to distinguish between an anthropology of anarchism on the one hand and anarchist anthropology on the other. And in order to do that, we had to have some idea of what constitute anarchist principles and values. On the last of those, Graeber is very clear. Anarchists, and these are my words, anarchists are committed, whether consciously or through habitus, to political practices and processes where hierarchies are absent, where there are no formal leaders, no leadership structures, and where, at least in the context of contemporary nation states, those practices and processes occur either in spite of or against the state. Put more positively, albeit rather more simplistically than Graeber does, anarchists are committed to political practices and processes that require and occur through participatively reached consensus. Now, while he doesn't make an explicit distinction between these two that I've identified, anthropology of anarchism and anarchist anthropology, he begins fragments which might be a discussion of the former. He does that to build on it and develop ideas about materializing the latter, and that's what we are asking about today. Can we materialize an anthropology and anarchist anthropology? So he begins his little book, and it's a really great book for those who haven't read it, not only by revealing the extent to which various early and mid-20th century anthropologists showed interest in anarchism. And that's quite, I mean, when I read it many years ago and reread it again recently, I'm always intrigued to see that some of those big names who had called themselves anarchists, big names when I was a student, which is before many of you here were born, other than some, not everybody. Okay, Graeber also reminds us of how much of what is now old-fashioned anthropology, an anthropology of globally diverse social forms, and I'm avoiding the word societies, I hate it, because of, and Graeber goes into it, why we shouldn't use it. So I'm saying he reminds us of how much of what is now old-fashioned anthropology of globally diverse social forms with their diverse political practices provided multiple examples of non-hierarchical political practices and processes. They included examples of what were then called acephalous, put into English, headless political systems. In many instances, and given that I was in South Africa, I was introduced to this from an Africa-focused perspective. Those were where kinship structures and inter-kin group relations underpinned all political processes, and where there were no political leaders such as so-called chiefs or kings. And there were other social forms also of this kind, where the political processes revolved around even more diffuse and unstructured relationships than kinship, such as between those who lived and worked contiguously and had, for survival purposes, to cooperate in their livelihood activities. I mention those because in anthropology of anarchism, I don't know if anybody's ever described anything of that kind, would include all such examples that can and do demonstrate that hierarchical power relations are not always necessary, and that alternatives to hierarchical political systems are available, albeit that they've tended to be hidden, except for amongst anthropologists of a particular generation. An anthropology of anarchism now should also include discussion of diverse examples of contemporary social practice, including those where non-hierarchical decision-making is for them the convention, and where that kind of political practice occurs either as resistance to state or other hierarchical practices, or occurs simply as a tactic to avoid the presence and impact of hierarchical systems. What then about working towards an anarchist anthropology? That's what Graeber's booklet offers us insightful suggestions about, and that's the webinar's topic. To develop an anarchist anthropology requires switching from simply recording, studying, comparing extant or historical examples of anarchist socio-political practices to an engaged anthropology in which, as anthropologists, we consciously build on what we know from what I've called an anthropology of anarchism to contribute to contemporary exercises, for lack of a better word, in practicing anarchist principles. Those are exercises or efforts in which those involved, often are members of social movements, but they also might be other functionally focused groups, educational groups, for example, as well as some in other intentional communities, but where those involved are themselves consciously committed to political practices and processes in which there are no formal leaders or leadership structures, and where their political practices and processes occur either in spite of or against whatever state or bureaucratic structure seeks to constrain their decision-making freedoms. As I've already implied, to develop an anarchist anthropology requires commitment by anthropologists to engaging alongside their interlocutors in political practices and processes that require and occur through consensus that is reached participatively, through everyone being both open to all others' perspectives and everyone being willing to shift their own perspectives in order to find commonly acceptable ground. Now, in some respects, that is to do nothing very different what's been the ideal, although insufficiently often the practice, of ethnographic fieldwork: to watch, to listen intently to, and most especially to learn from our interlocutors, and consciously to avoid imposing our own perspectives onto what we hear, see, and experience when associating with our interlocutors. But, and this is crucial, it's also much more than that, in that it means participating and collaborating with our interlocutors in their efforts, or what I've called so far exercises, to work against the dominant grain as regards political practice and the dominant grain's reliance on hierarchical bureaucratic systems that ultimately tend to impose and preclude people making autonomous decisions and acting autonomously. But being able to and ready to do that introduces various challenges, since it requires an unswerving commitment to, and in its literal sense, a solidarity with those who seek to work against or outside of the reach of the state, and to apply what we might understand as anarchist principles to do so. But what happens, and here's my criticism of the, in a way, of the association between of the commissions between anarchist anthropology and autonomy studies. Well, what happens when those engaging in such exercises turn out to have amongst them some who have simply participated in those exercises in order to instrumentalize anarchist principles, but ultimately to establish a new hierarchy in which they become the leaders? How do we as anthropologists address that conundrum if we are in solidarity with the group?
And
I also worry.
11 minutes already. So,
okay, I'll stop. I'll be stopping in one more minute.
Okay.
I also worry about developing an anarchist anthropology that engages practically and uncritically with social movements, the members of which assert that consensus is core to all their practices and processes, in order to avoid, if not resist, their subservience to dominant state structures, thereby to achieve autonomy. I worry because, apparently to me, there's a strong likelihood that such movements, once they've achieved their goal of autonomy, may become foundations for new alternative state formations, with all the hierarchies associated with such forms. Of course, these are questions that any engaged anthropologists have to face, but we do need to use them as pointers for maintaining our anthropological criticality even whilst engaging.
Okay, thank you, Muggsy. Elizabeth, you are next, but let me introduce you properly, okay? Yeah, okay.
But Virginia, can I suggest that maybe we introduce Nori, because I already spoke a lot. Maybe let's hear Nori and then me.
No,
That's
me.
me.
Let me do it. Let me do it. let me do it close to the way we've done it. Okay, so you're next.
Okay.
We'll have lots of time. It's fine. I didn't say some things about you. So Elizabeth, who goes by Bette, right? Bette. I'm not sure about the Portuguese pronunciation, but Albertas is the co-chair of the Commission on Anarchist Anthropology and Autonomy Studies. She's currently postdoc in the Answer Department at the Universidade Federal Fluminense in Rio de Janeiro, Brazil, where she coordinates a research group on illegalisms, armed territories, and militarized practices. She's also a research associate in the anthropology department at the University of Witwatersrand, Wits, in Johannesburg, South Africa, so not where Muggsy is, but nonetheless, where she works on building occupations and with social movements in the inner city. She recently published her PhD dissertation thesis as a book titled Merchants of Insecurity or Security, City and Citizenship in South Africa and Brazil, comparing the contemporary production of segregated urban forms in Brazil and South Africa. She is also currently working on another book, second book, titled Informal Evictions, Police as Urban Police as Urban Infrastructure in Johannesburg Inner City, about the politics of policing, securitized placemaking, and the production of the unequal neoliberal city. There's a lot there that I had not said before, so that's fine. Go ahead, Elizabeth.
So yeah, Virginia is Betty, the pronunciation in Portuguese from Rio de Janeiro, Betty, with lots of sh at the
Yes, I know.
Betty. Yeah. So Betty Albernaz. So Virginia, as I just said, I have like a lot of work studying the state. So I am an anthropologist of the state. So another misunderstanding is that we, the anarchist anthropologists, we don't need people studying the state or statal forms of like societies in general and their mechanisms. So it's needed. Now, even David Graeber in the book that Muggsy was mentioning, like says of the importance of a theory of power so we can actually be a social emancipatory practice and emancipatory social theory. So I am needed and I'm happy to be here. So I want to provoke, like I planned myself to talk a little about what Muggsy provoked about the relationship between anarchism and anthropology in terms of like the mutual benefits of this association, the mutual contaminations of this, just because it's not the anthropology of anarchism, it's anarchist anthropology. So it's a challenge to find this, but not so, it's not a big challenge, actually, if you think, like Muggsy said, and Graeber also in his book, there are fragments of an anarchist anthropology from the vocation of the discipline in like studying like smaller non-statal and sometimes like Pierre Clijsters would say anti-statal societies that's actually or groups that actively sabotage the emancipation of political power and also economic from the community relationships and from the control of the people. We have like some like points of contact that are very easy to establish with this because of these focus, ethnographic focus, and also in many other points. And I want to start like talking about from the anarchist contribution to anthropology. And I have like a little list in terms of like the political and the anarchist perspective like kind of like provides a political and utopian like north based on the abolition of private property and all forms of domination. Let's say that's the basic of anarchist ideology, all forms of domination, market, state, gender, race, like I said. So things that we can think about about our discipline based on this principle, simple principle of anarchism. So, for example, the abolition of hierarchies of knowledge and the heuristic value of indigenous knowledge, that it's something that it's currently very under the spotlight in our discipline, but it's also something hard to do, and to practice in the field work and in our publications and publication practice also. So a second aspect I would mention is thinking about the access to anthropological knowledge and to the spaces where this knowledge is shared. So we can think about publishing fees. We can think about fees to go to Congress, thinking about Creative Commons, open access, and all these forms of giving people access and make knowledge, anthropological knowledge, accessible, even language, the language that you use to describe what you do. I would also say that in terms of work ethics among peers and with our interlocutors in the field, the ethics of non-domination, the ethics of producing not a perfect symmetrization, but a more balanced power relation in the field. So we have also the conscience that the anthropological field work, the ethnography, can be also a very exploitative activity, I guess, if you think that we extract something that for the people are every day is banalities. Now we are interested in their everyday, and they give that to us very freely and not to think. It's like how people, the big data capitalism exploits the excerpts of information and posts from movements, simple movements on the internet. We take that and we produce value with that. And what are we giving back? It's also about thinking about the political implications of ethnographic work, especially in environments field environments that you have rights disputes happening, like in the inner city of Johannesburg. I lived in Johannesburg for 9 years, and I'm building a work there, comparative work with Brazil, very focused in the ethnography of the city and in the city and with city residents. And in Johannesburg, for example, I work with the occupations, and there you have all this constitutional cases going on, commissions of inquiry, and your work in judicial culture that has this culture of justification. They actually use our work in their judgments. They use their people researchers like Wilhelm Solomon, which work inspired me, and it's my colleague at WITS in the anthropology department. He was heard in one of the commissions that were established to investigate a very deadly fire that happened in one occupation in Johannesburg, in the city, where 77 people died, and people justified that in a way, the public interest because they were illegal migrants. Most of the people that died were illegal migrants. So it's a very complicated place to work, and we have to think about the implications of our work. Also, the autonomies, the focus in ethnographic autonomies, studying the autonomies, or the wannabe autonomies, or the left behind autonomies that we also talk. There are the autonomies, the anarchist theory called the incomplete or in development autonomies. They don't work fully in self-government, self-determination, and self-regulation, but they aim to do that. But there are also, that it's more like my case, the autonomies that are the left behind autonomies. The autonomies, there are autonomies because they were literally renegated by the sovereignty of the state as not part of their citizenship world. So they have to organize themselves as autonomies or they are going to die, or they are not going to reproduce their life. So that's also a type of autonomy that we can also that we also research in our group. There are many types because our approach is always grounded, is always empirical based. So we have many people in the commission bringing their own experience with autonomies and discussing those things. So ethnography can be from adopting this bottom up perspective and margins center approach, focusing in autonomies. We expect also to regain this epistemological and political imagination and of the capability of prefiguration of our own ethnographic work. And I think finally, and not to say most importantly, I think this debate in anthropology is technically solved, but I think there are people that still slip to that type of usurpation or almost total freedom over the native positions and words. There's this in the anarchist theory, this discussion between the difference between representation and delegation. So representation is a very contractualist type of relationship. You give people the authorization to speak in the name of the others, but they can say whatever they want. And delegation, you are binded to what people told you and to reproduce the best you can, and you have controls to evaluate this delegation work. So it also speaks to this idea of emancipating meanings, not from the meanings that people give in their field, in their lives, not living their lives every day, and from what we extract this information, totally emancipation with the theory of representation. So they are saying this, but they actually wants to say, I think it's exactly what we try to avoid as a disciplinary practice in the field work to produce epistemologically relevant theory. I think for now it would be the dialogues between anarchism and anthropology. I can move back in the next time I speak, but I think that's it for now.
Great, perfect. Thank you, Betsy. Betsy. Okay, and we will have a very good discussion. But let me first, Norhisa Arai actually sent me a shorter bio than the other two, but I will read it anyway, and I'm quite looking forward to what he has to say. Let's see. Born in Mie, Japan, Norhisa Arai holds a Bachelor of Arts degree from Osaka University. Since 2013, he has been in Mexico and earned a master's degree and a PhD in Latin American Studies from UNAM, National Autonomous University of Mexico. Currently, he's pursuing postdoctoral research at the University Program for Studies on Asia, Africa, and Oceania called WAU, focusing on the historical process and actual trends in the dismantling and transformation of rural areas in the Asia-Pacific region. That's what I got. You want to add anything? It's fine. Otherwise, go ahead. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Do you hear me?
Sure. Thank you.
Okay. Well, as a Japanese, I prepared a small presentation. I will share you. Okay.
Okay, remember, it's short.
Okay, short.
Right.
Okay. So, my name is Norhisa Arai, from the National Autonomous University of Mexico. It's called UNAM. People call me Nori because it's an easy nickname for both English and Spanish speaker. to pronounce. It's a great pleasure to meet you all today, and I'd like to introduce saying that first I'd like to offer my way to brief definition of anarchist anthropology. For me, it's David Graeber is undoubtedly the person most responsible for this definition. But put very simply, anarchist anthropology, as I think, it's both a theoretical framework and also a political practice that utilizes anthropological and historical insights. That is to say that the intellectual legacy accumulated to date, just in order to relativize and critique the current taken for granted forms of the nation states, the economy, and the society. In other words, to again borrow Graeber's words, might we not say that any attempt to transcend not only the state, but also modernity by making full use of anthropological imagination constitute, as I think, an endeavor of anarchist anthropology. Okay, so I've approached in my doctoral dissertation, I explored the concept of comunalidad. It's source of the self-governance from of indigenous communities in Oaxaca and Mexico, as Bechi also told that the source of self-governance. To understand the nature of cooperation in the northern highlands of Oaxaca, Sierra Norte de Oaxaca, Marcel Mauss's theory of the gift is actually he's the anthropologist whom Graeber most highly re-evaluated. I think it's crucial in my research, so I focused primarily on the mechanism of celebration and found out that concepts of temporary autonomous zone, TAZ, and permanent autonomous zone, PAZ, described by Graeber, and also, of course, the main principal ideologue is Hakim Bey, resonated deeply with my findings. In Latin America, including Mexico, there still exists a time of profound anarchy, a continuous cycle of gift giving, and that encompasses the sacred and nature itself, where the limits of extravagance are pushed to the extreme, and it is no longer clear who is giving to whom. Okay, so I was telling from my profile that you may have understood that I am actually a postdoctoral fellow in Mexico, but I'm specialized now in Asian studies, from Latin American studies to Asian studies. For the past 2 years or so, I have been examining the trend of returning movement, migrant movement of young people to the countryside in Japan, and its role that places newly created by migrants pray as asylum. In other words, I have come to understand that for young people so tired of today's neoliberal competitive society, rural areas which have become increasingly depopulated in 60s, 70s in Japan due to population decline and past migration, are serving as venues for the construction of the new zona. Historical research on the role of traditional mountain villages as sanctuaries has also been revisited in Japan in recent years. And we can extend these thinkings to the cities also. Cities offer expanding possibility as parazomians is a concept of a curator or independent investigator called Waite. Even in densely populated cities like Tokyo, there are ways to resist, and these involve the pursuits of anarchy-style autonomous spaces. A well-known example of this is the activities of Amateur Riot in Koenji. Formed in 2005, Amateur Riot began Matsumoto when Matsumoto and Yamashita opened Amateurs Riot #1 in Koenji on the western side of Tokyo. Matsumoto running a recycle shop and Yamashita store selling vintage and second-hand clothes. Furthermore, the group made its presence felt in protest activities such as anti-nuclear demonstrations from 2011, you know, what happened in Japan. And by not only planning and organizing cultural events in their own space, but also building the infrastructure itself, including a recycle store, a bar, an art gallery, a radio station, and a guest house, they shaped a community rooted in the local area and created a dense network for cultural activities. So the potential for self-governance in such cities is emerging as a form of pareidolia, not only in Tokyo, but also in many other major and regional cities, alongside the asylums that arise from rural migration. So it is therefore no exaggeration to say that anarchism is currently the focus of the most attention with Japan's left-wing movement. And there is no doubt that David Graeber stands at the theoretical center of this movement. So as final remarks of my first participation, anarchism is well positioned to be accepted as a theory and the practice of social critique. I agree with Graeber's view that anthropological evidence is what gives this critique its power. In this current era of digital fascism, I believe that the framework of anthropological imagination, that the legacy Graeber left behind, will continue to be a valuable tool for resisting a state that grows ever more tyrannical. So that is my first participation. Okay.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. How do I? Okay.
I don't know. Oh, there you go.
Okay.
Okay. So thank you very much, Nori. Nori. Probably speaks Spanish just as well, right? Okay. Anyway, I think it's a very good time to actually open up in some ways. But I do want, I mean, Betty already said she wants to say something. So let's do the following. Are there certain things that you think are crucial that you didn't already say, any of the three of you? I have other questions as well, but yeah. No? No? Nori? No? The other two are shaking heads. Okay. Let me ask again for clarity's sake. I think I asked Betsy the last time when she was presenting at the Council of Commissioners, are you an anarchist? Or I forget how I asked the question, but you want to explain that as well? I mean, I don't know, towards an anarchist anthropologist. I get the impression
Yeah, there are not just anarchists in the Anarchist Anthropology Commission. There are also the people and also the anarchists. The real anarchists of the commission, the reference is Cássio Brancaleone, which is the co-chair with me, but I am not an anarchist, not because I have anything against being an anarchist. I'm just not a very big fan of affiliating myself to isms, and it's too much of a commitment, and just because of that. But I study the anarchism theory, the anarchist theory, to be able to establish those dialogues. But I'm not an anarchist. I'm also, like I said, I'm originally a Marxist. People are going to kill me, but I am originally a Marxist. And I think like the Marxist theory of values and of the working of capitalist society is still very good. I just not a fan of their solution to the existence of the state and how the relationship between the state and revolution. The way they see society is it's not complexified enough for me and for the time I lived. So obviously it's something that other theorists in anarchism gave like a more complex view of society, like the role of what was considered the lumpen proletariat that didn't have, like for the Marxist, a value, for the revolution, like a real value, but or not like a noble value. And for us, it's like some people that are most interesting, more important, maybe for us to think what we do. And for other reasons too, like that, I think it's Marxism, especially political. They're like political solutions because they were all like contaminated with also the mission of producing a manifesto to a movement. So it ends up not being satisfying for me. So it's very complex filiations, like in our research, in our commission. But yeah, we are gathered around this interest in rethinking power and domination in society and producing a libertarian social theory on social organization. Huh? So if you are up for it and you have an interesting field work, we are accepting you. We are not, how do you say, like when you're dogmatic. We're not not anthropologists, not anarchist, dogmatic. We're not. Yeah.
All right. Let me move on. I'll ask Muggsy. Are you an anarchist? Yeah, I know you used to be a Marxist. Are you like Betty as well?
No, I'm not an anarchist. I probably, like Betty, still value a lot of the Marxist theory.
Right.
Enormously. Like Betty, I'm completely horrified by the solutions that Marxists have taken upon themselves to impose on people. And so in that sense, I buy into a whole lot of what I'm understanding Graeber to be saying with anarchist anthropology. I want to go back to one of the points that Betty made about this idea of a kind of this massive revolution which changes the world, which seems to have, and these are Graeber's ideas, that in order to change anything properly, we've got to sort of overturn what's there and replace it with something else. And Graeber's saying actually is a much more, I'm going to use the word reformist, not his words, but a reformist process, a process of introducing alternatives slowly from beneath, quietly, and that then ultimately has the potential to change the overall structure rather than to try and do it all in one shot. And in that sense, if those are anarchist anthropological perspectives or anarchist perspectives, then I'm an anarchist. But I would never have called myself an anarchist. And I'm really fascinated by all of what it offers. But I'm also frightened, as I said in my presentation, right, that there's an idealism in there, almost a utopianism, which has the potential to come back and bite those who try and support it.
Okay, I'll get back to that. Thank you, Muggsy. Nori, how about you? Are you an anarchist? Simple question.
Well, I want to be anarchist, but I don't think I am one yet. If anything, perhaps being an anarchist is a goal. Maybe I'm striving toward. I see myself as a student, an investigator, maybe who deeply resonates with anarchist methodology and the ways of life. However, depending on how society changes in the future, I might end up retreating to the mountains of Oaxaca and occasionally calling myself an anarchist within the community. So that I think the future is open. But as for now, I don't think I can say that I'm an anarchist.
Can I briefly add one more sentence?
Go ahead, Muggsy.
Even if I wanted to be, I don't think I'd have the capacity to be at this point. I'm too old to engage in the way I think is necessary. I'm too old. I'm too committed to my creature comforts.
Betty is smiling. Is that because you don't buy Muxie saying he's too old?
Yes, exactly.
Well,
He's very vibrant member of our commission, so
I'm sure he is. Yes. Um, I may open up pretty soon, but let me ask you a couple of other things. I think listening to the three of you, uh, especially even now when I ask a very blunt question, uh, is uh, is an anarchist anthropology? You're all saying you're not there yet. You would like to be. But I don't know, is it anthropology or does anthropology have to basically go away uh, because we are doing something? Okay, Betsy, come on, you're shaking your head. Go ahead.
yeah. Well, can I say something about that? I think that was one I was prepared like to talk about that. This path forward as actually a backwards like movement too, no? Because to the vocation and history and theories of the anthropology that so they are already there, and they can have that we can find anarchists like fragments like Weber did with the fragments of anarchist anthropology using Marcel Mauss and mostly Marcel Mauss and Pierre Clastres' Society Against the State, but also like Heathcliff Brown, that he said he was a Marco Brown, was a huge anarchist before becoming an anthropologist, and used a lot of anarchist theory in his analysis of the African political systems. So it's there. It's there not just with like the sociology. Marcel Mauss was also a socialist, and it was also like involved. Many anthropologists were involved in this environment, from historical environment, social environment, political environment, where anarchism also was developing. And together with this discussion, the mid 19th century, we are also like seeing the first like properly, not the ethnographic work, but the Borges work with the interest for other people in the world, and even people using, like the illuminists, the political theorists, using those societies, the simple primitive societies, like they used to say, to illustrate their like political theories. So they all come out of that environment, and there are things being discussed. So the anthropology that is born there, it's also dialoguing with this intellectual, political, and social environment. There are many, like I said, theories, established theories in anthropology, or part of them, like the positive anarchy from Heathcliff Brown about the African societies, that are contributions to anarchist perspective. I mentioned reciprocity with Moss and the idea of mutual aid of Pieter Kropotkin, which is also like a fundamental like read in the anarchist theory. So the two works are very close in terms of preoccupations and even conclusions, like through different like paths, but yeah, very similar. But also like, for example, the postmodern like this phase of like whining about power relations in anthropology, that people say that the postmoderns, they question through like the writing, ethnography as writing, and the writing activity and field work. They also question, they didn't offer like great solutions, but they also question power relations in like ethnography. All the people that for me I read in the anthropology of the state, that question the state as a category of to explain society, like a category that you don't think, you don't question, like you just use to explain like society, like Philip Abrams with his notes and on the difficulty of studying the state, or the people like that question this like structure. Even Polanzas, which is a Marxist, can help us think that the state as a class in itself, like with interests, et cetera, et cetera. So It's like a lot of things that you can find inspiration to anarchist anthropology. It's not something closed like a discipline or like that it needs to be built. Maybe it's a lot of something that it needs to be found and it needs to be like regained, like maybe finding a different origin story for the anthropology, not denying the association between anthropology and colonialism, but maybe thinking that there were like the possibilities based on the study of these societies that anthropology study, that non-statal and anti-statal sometimes society, that was most of the story and reality of humanity, and most of the time. So the state of form is something historically dated, and that's also something that's there to be questioned and aligns with many discussions in anthropology. So I think it's there. It's anthropology, and it's always been anthropology, actually, I could say. We were always there, but you didn't know. Yeah. It was just a matter of like retrospectively finding the fragments, I think.
Okay, Muncie, right, Muncie? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I can't agree more. I don't know how one can think of an anthropology of anthropology without thinking from an anarchistic perspective, because the history of anthropology is not, or a lot of it is not is not as a discipline. We've created that discipline, and we are killing our students and killing the discipline by treating it as a discipline, by making our students read way more than is necessary, and then they have to build it into. This is the editor of a journal speaking. Build it into everything they write in a way which has no relevance to what they have to write about, but they have to build this large chunk of their papers with all sorts of references to, and there's and we've taught in a way, and I'm responsible to. This is the canon, but anthropology didn't begin with a canon. It began wanting to know about the diversity of human social forms or socio-cultural forms, and that in itself tells me that the two. I mean, we don't need to give them. They say talk about Anarchy Brown. I'll later. A.R. Radcliffe Brown, and people like that as anarchists, because they were actually thinking that way. Having said that, I also want to say something else. One of the people whom we ought to be bringing into this discussion is Keith Hart and his work, which isn't anarchist, and yet it is. That whole human economy program which he established and has had many people work on is about people working out of the sight of the state. Of course, Jim Scott, whom Norrie raised, is also important here, but that's from a more political perspective. But Keith Hart writes the obituary for Graeber in our journal. Why Keith Hart? Because the two of them worked very closely. Keith was working on alternative ways of making life, of creating livelihoods and exchanging with other people outside of the market system, which is dominated by the state and by the global state. We don't have a global state in any notion and nominal form, but we have a global state. It operates in the economic sphere at the moment out of the USA. Notice how the dollar dominates everything. There's a battle going on at the moment, and we can see that ending. But we need to build Hart's work into that whole human economy program, and all the work that's gone into that and continues to go. And I raise that because Keith was a polymath. He wasn't an anthropologist. He was an anthropologist. He was an economist. He was a philosopher. And he was also a very difficult man as a personality. And that would have made him very difficult to be an anarchist in practice because he wouldn't have been able to work consensually because he was too opinionated to do
right.
that.
Can I ask you guys something before I open
You want
up?
to ask Nori? You want to put Nori on this?
Well, okay. Well, I don't know. He didn't ask to speak, so
Oh,
go ahead.
thank you. I think it's a bit maybe repeated, but from my view, I understand, as I mentioned in my presentation, I understand anarchist anthropology to be a political stance. However, I think adopting that political stance requires a solid foundation of anthropological knowledge. So this is really anthropological things, I think. In other words, to repeat, I believe it is a political stance that actively employs anthropology for social critique and works to dismantle the inevitability of the state. So I suspect this is a significant challenge for all anthropologists, as it involves opening up the discipline to a political orientation. That is precisely why I find myself maybe wondering whether I am truly succeeding in this endeavor.
Yeah, what I was going to say actually applies to what you've said, but maybe it anticipates some other things that people may want to say. I remember some years ago when I was at the University of California at Santa Cruz, we had invited Clifford Geertz to come and for 2 or 3 days to speak to some of the graduate students and so forth. And he didn't really want to give a major speech, but he agreed to do a kind of fireside chat. So people were asking him questions and he answered. I don't remember most of the questions asked, and I don't remember most of his answers, but I do remember one in particular. I think it was either the first or the second question he was asked. And it was, do you think that there would be anthropology 100 years from now? This would have been towards the end of this century or whatever. It was like 1999, 2000, something like that. And I remember his answer. His answer was, I don't know whether there will be something called anthropology, but I do know that the things that anthropologists work on will still be issues and will need to be worked on. So, I've never forgotten that, but I thought it was very wise. A couple of you are nodding, but I don't know. In some ways, a lot of what you guys have said suggests something that I don't know, that may be there in the future. In some ways, you are also rehabilitating or referring to some of the classic anthropologists, some in a way that almost makes it look like, I don't know, anthropology has always been anarchist. Who knows? In some ways, it looks kind of conservative. I don't think you mean that. I think there's a whole long streak of Marxist anthropology that may now be trying to figure out what to do, but it's a combination of things. And it made me think of Geertz. So, yeah.
Virginia, can I say,
Of
I
course.
think we need to remember that anthropology itself has never been a single discipline.
Right.
It's had one name. And there's a whole lot of, I'm going to use the word conservative in a different way from what you have, very conservative or reactionary anthropology. Anthropology which is being designed to support the state, which Nori wants to dismantle, to support particular practices by states. And so anthropology, because it's so diverse, what is it?
Well, back to what Geert said, you would have liked it. Anyway, yeah, Betsy, yeah.
I want to interact like with two questions that, well, first with Maxi said about the state, like I joined this commission because of my like disappointment with the promise of the state, particularly like this idea of like I'll protect you from others and from the market. That's not how it works anymore. So let's think about this social contract and how it was made, like personally and politically. That was my motivation. And I thought it was a place where I could find more radical um, theories and discussions about the state, which is, I am an anthropologist of the state. So I thought it was an opportunity. But I want to interact with two questions that Maxi made. And I think it also mobilizes what I was prepared to talk about, also the contributions of anthropology to anarchism. So Maxi asked, how do we deal with the infiltrators in our commission? We burn them, Maxi. I'm joking. But what do we do not with these people that joins the commission trying to concentrate power and to take over? The idea itself of taking over is an aberration for us, and also with your provocation with engaging uncritically with social movements, for example, because I engage with a social movement and I think about that. What is my autonomy to say? What I also think about critically about how this movement works and operates, and because it's part of this like discussion that we have in the anarchist theory, that is this tension between autonomies and heteronomies, because the concept and what we can say also is the tension between the principle of liberty and authority, which is something in more like a Proudhonian terms, which is this idea that the autonomies are never perfect, we can say. We find like very close to a perfect concept of autonomy for the anarchist political theory, but in reality, in the anthropological work, we not always find those autonomies. We can assume that most of the time they would say unperfect or incomplete autonomies. So anthropology, because they can be wannabe or leftovers, left behinds, like I said, but also because when you think about the self-determination, self-regulation, and self-government of autonomies are like a monad, like a uniform unit, like, because when the anarchist theory thinks about autonomies, they think autonomies in relation to the state or in relation to the market. But within those autonomies, there are also power relations. There are also like many sources of oppression also that can be happening or being built based in this concentration of power. So it would be a lot like a society against the state from that Pierre Classes talks about in his book. So there are social mechanisms that produce to control this, in theory, in the anarchist theory, to control this emancipation of political power and of economical relations from social relations. But for us, what we contribute as an anthropologist to that discussion is exactly opening up that box of autonomy and complexifying the power relations within autonomies and those processes between autonomies currently existing of many types. So in our group, and I think with social movements, we are also like, we are not like utopic people that don't think like, oh, innocent. Like, I don't think let's all work with these principles and believe that everyone is working the same way. Like in reality, there are always like not just like evil minds trying to take power, but also social processes that are, we can say, natural from the social division of work within a group, or even the political leadership in the group. That those spaces, they concentrate power. And as those communities theoretically do, not in the perspective of autonomies, we do that too in our commission. So we are very Like,
Can I stop you for a second? I want to make sure that there's time for other people to talk.
yes. I'm done. That's the last thing.
No, that's all right. That's all right. Anyway,
I'll just
can I?
clarify, Chair.
Okay.
I wasn't asking about infiltrators in the commission. I was talking about infiltrators in social movements.
Right.
But I really like your reference to incomplete autonomies, because it ties me to another recent body of work coming out of Francis Nyamjo on incompleteness. And this whole idea of completeness, of everything being totalized, is part of our fundamental misunderstanding of the way the world works. It's never that way.
Okay.
And if we recognize that.
Right. Okay. Yeah. Can I open up? I mean, people are being very, very quiet. So yeah. I don't know. Does anybody want to say anything? Ask a question, make a comment? We can let you do this. You can unmute yourself, or you can put it in the chat and I will read it out loud. Come on, don't be shy. We've silenced all of you. That's not what this commission wants. Okay, yeah. Mabruk, go ahead.
Virginia, yeah. Thank you.
Virginia, oh, my name. Virginia.
Do you hear me?
Right. Yes, of course. Yes.
Great. So thank you for us for this great debate. I have two questions. So the first one is for Miguel. It's about how to say about how can we as anthropologists committed to anarchist anthropology balance the solidarity with interlocutors and keeping critical distance with them. This is, for example, when anthropologists notes signs of exploitation, for example, or hierarchies, new hierarchies in a group, should here in this case, should anthropologists step in as an active participant or just notice and document and critique what's happening? So this is my first question. My second question is for Elizabeth. Elizabeth, if anarchist anthropology wants to break down knowledge hierarchies and make it democratic, how can we practice it inside our universities today?
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, I think our university now are almost neoliberal, instrumental, yeah. etc., etc.
Yeah. Okay, Muggsy, you first.
Yeah. Thanks for the question. Thank you for the question. I think it's an important question that I was raising it as a question. How do we balance it? Well, there are two answers to that. The one is, if we are engaged anthropologists, which is what I'm arguing to be in, I'm arguing that if you're going to be a full-on anarchist anthropologist, working out of developing an anarchist anthropology, you have to engage with solidarity. And the way in which you can do that, if you have a critical perspective, is to raise it in discussion in the consensus group, because there'll always be disagreements, and work with it. However, if your criticality leads to your having to say, well, I have to walk away from this because I can't agree with what you're doing. You spell it out, you say, I'm perceiving it, I'm not coming at this from a especially high, sort of intellectually more advanced position than you are. I'm just putting my words in, my ideas in for you guys to think about. But if we can't work with it, and if it's too difficult, then I have to break my solidarity. And that's the tension that I'm personally raising. That's why I'm too old, because I don't think I have the
You're
capacity
not too
to
old.
do that anymore.
That's
To
why you're
engage
so
that.
amazing, Max. You are capable of making these questions, posing this question.
Okay.
Okay, Mitchie.
Okay.
Rogue asked you a question directly.
Yeah.
Mitchie,
Okay.
unmute you.
Yes. So the question about, I think I will interact with the question directed to me and then with Magsi and what he picked up from the other provocation. So how do we practice this hierarchy of knowledge, like breaking hierarchies of knowledge in the university? I would mention, to not waste a lot of time, but I would mention an experience here in Brazil of one of our colleagues, I think it's the president of the COC, I think Felipe Fernandes, he's president of ICE. I missed because we are all so Felipe Fernandes, University from Bahia, from a state of Brazil called Bahia. So in Bahia, we not just have the largest Black population in Brazil, out of Africa, we would say, in Brazil and in the country, in Bahia. So the affirmative inclusion of these people, it's also like very relevant for the balance of social power in that context, thinking about the university. But also there's a large indigenous population, like lots of groups they live in Bahia. It's very close, closer than Rio de Janeiro, I would say, from the Amazon and from that area, from the start of the Amazon forest and the agrarian frontier. They're here in Brazil. And they have initiatives of not just including these people via affirmative action in the university, but they have like all this language politics within the university and with the presentation of works, for example. I come like in South Africa, for example, my experience at WITS, the demand for the proper English, it's such an imperialist form of incorporating a society, groups in society that's so unequal, considered the most unequal society in the world by the World Bank, South Africa. If you demand proper English from people in like the works that they present, like if that counts and it's that way, it's going to exclude a lot of people, and they don't incorporate like this in their linguistic politics, the inclusion of other languages in South Africa that has 12 official languages, which is a very complex social situation. But here in Brazil, we have this experience in Bahia, also like with a lot of like philosophy and epistemology being built with professors by professors that are from this original indigenous people, that there's also like they are also being included in the university. When you think all forms of inclusion, like for example, there was a research at WITS when I was there that like 80%, something horrible, of the students, they are under food vulnerability. So they don't eat enough in the university, like when they are there, or they are always struggling to get access to food. Well, those are things that you have to pay attention in your university environment, in the way you manage spaces. For example, there are a lot of disputed spaces in the university that I can say it's the commonplace in the university here in Brazil, that disputed uses of spaces within the university and how you solve those conflicts, the way you build those consensus. So there are a lot of ways of putting that in practice. Maybe I should not interact with Maxi's like question now, but yeah, maybe later. that is open to the people.
Right.
Can I add a sentence?
Okay.
Yes.
In response to the question about working in the university, I think we are right here in the World Anthropological Union. We're in the process of revising constitution and what we call the organizational guidelines and rules. And we have, for reasons beyond my comprehension, just abandoned the consensus principle in favor of majoritarian decision making. Why, I don't know. So we're being increasingly neoliberalized here too. I'll stop there.
Okay. I thought you were going to complain, Muggsy.
I'm complaining.
Well, no, not about that. But I thought you were going to say that Elizabeth's mention of all blacks and black students and indigenous folks was identitarian.
No, I understand that it happens.
I know you understand that it happens, but it's not your favorite.
Not in the moment. Not a place to have that discussion now.
Okay. All right. Somebody else? I know it's a little bit okay. Have to go. Thank you. All right.
Well, we're beginning to lose our.
Yeah, we are.
Audience.
But yeah, it's a little bit past an hour and a half. But let's just question anybody before we conclude. Comments, questions, critiques. Don't be shy.
Question for Betsy: who's published your book?
The university, my university.
Oh,
yeah, university. Yeah.
Is it
that
in
we
English?
have a published. No, the first one is in Portuguese, my thesis, and the second is currently in Portuguese. I want to translate, but my second one, the informal evictions one, is about the case, constitutional case in South Africa with the police operations and occupations in Johannesburg in a city. It's going to be in English, so doesn't have a publishing house yet.
Right, we'll get there. Anybody else? Cassio, you're being very quiet, but we can let you speak a little bit. Okay.
Giovanna's put up her hand.
Okay, let's say no thanks. Okay, but I did just get, what is this?
Giovanna.
Wait a second. That's
a question for Dori to speak more.
Yeah,
I think Dori should speak more.
No, I know, but I'm looking at the chat. Steven Sarajian said, "Can Norihia speak more about tasks among indigenous people in Mexico?" Nori? This is for you.
Okay. Thank you for the question. It's so I speak about the communities from Oaxaca, and they have that philosophy, communal philosophy that is called comunalidad. So the comunalidad is based on 5 elements. First is the territory. The second is their communal works, like they have something called tekio. So all the members of the community have to participate without being paid. They still have this mechanism to mutual aid, and also they have their own assembly, that they have the way to decide their political or social decisions together. And also they have so-called cargos, sistema de cargos. It's the cargo system is that it came from Spain actually, but they use this how do you say, in 1 year each, they have to change their occupation, so that it's like secretary or is the leader of the community could be changed just by 1 year. So it is a really democratic way to maintain their autonomy. And there's fifth element that I mentioned is the fiesta festival. They used to have 2 or 3 saints in their communities, and each birthday of that saint is like a great celebration. And then there's actually very much amount of the money goes on that festival. So actually they produce a lot for that festivals, and then consume together. No? It's like and you can see the contract between the saints and the villagers. So they have a kind of the contract that they offer some a product or like or money, and then actually they believe that the how do you say the gift from the saints also, no? So that you will be cured by the disease you have, or something like that. That is the contract. So in this festival, you can see that I think the tasks, because it's not, they have like a mechanism for permanent autonomous zone. However, I think they have like a perspective of, we can apply the perspective of a temporary autonomous zone, because they actually, their life is all inside the capitalism system, no? So you cannot say that they are totally out of that system, and then they are celebrating that festivals without any question of money that I mentioned. So in that meaning, I think we can apply more the idea of path, the temporary autonomous zone, in these communities, as if you are free, no? You can live in this moment, but actually that is the contradiction, that they have to rely on the actual market economy also. I think it's the limit that that these kind of autonomous communities represent now. I think it was very.
That's all right. We can talk individually, but it's getting to the point where I think Giovanna has her hand up. She's been very patient, but I also want to say we need to have her be the last. It's about 10:43 a.m. here, so a little over an hour, and I don't know, an hour and 40 minutes. Giovanna, go ahead.
Yes. I don't know if you have any suggestions for education, because I am trying to understand what is anarchist anthropology. It's not very easy for me to understand it, even if after this webinar, I think I know a bit more. So thank you for your explanations. I'm trying to reflect on how to deal with anarchist anthropology in education, for example. I'm working a lot, or I've been working a lot in education, and I saw that in education we fluctuate in many countries. They fluctuate between hierarchical education to autonomous, a more autonomous education. In some countries, it's very very strictly ruled from the top. In other countries, they are trying to reach autonomy or integrate indigenous education and using break hierarchy in knowledge, using, for example, peer education, bottom-up teaching methods, or education to solidarity. So we are trying to reflect this need to not to be too hierarchical in education. And for example, in Italy, we are in the middle, and we try since the beginning of 2003 or 4, we began to help schools to become autonomous. So now there is autonomy in schools. It's officially autonomous, but sometimes we are struggling, still struggling to make schools really autonomous. But I think that in teaching, we have very advanced methods since kindergarten, since the first levels of schools, because we put the society and the individual students in the middle of education. They are the protagonist. I don't know if it's the right. They are the most important thing in education. So we don't care too much of what is imposed from the top, and we try to do an education from the bottom. And this is what we are discussing a lot also in the IUAES Commission on Anthropology and Education. But I don't know how to match this with what you are doing in anarchist anthropology. So if you will have any suggestions, I will be glad to compare what we are doing to make our students from not only in university, because when they arrive at the university, if they have not been trained from the beginning, since the primary school or kindergarten and so on, to work together, to understand the solidarity and so on, they want to be able to be really democratic or to understand how to behave also in university teaching and learning. So thank you for, yes.
I think that's a great question, but it's sort of a general question. I know you would like to hear. I'm going to ask people to be short. It's already, I don't know, it's getting late. It's getting very late. But part of the reason I think it's a great question is because it's a question about practicality. Okay, so was the previous one. What do we do in the universities? What do you do in the schools? To what extent is what you're talking about practical? I don't know. Okay, so Betty, you want to go first?
I can be very brief and short my answer, because I talked a little about that in the university. I think in the school environment, Giovanna is completely right. If you don't receive a liberating education, you are not ready to practice a libertarian theory when you get to the university. So I think it's very important. It's more like an invitation to think about autonomy. I think it's in the anarchist theory, it's not a solved discussion. I don't think it's something open still. Like people are still debating what's an autonomy, incomplete autonomous types of autonomy. So I think it's more an invitation to establish a dialogue with Giovanna's commission and think the autonomies in education and how they contribute to that discussion. But anyone that is willing to problematize power relations and forms of domination rethinking power and society from the state and from capitalist society, we are willing to like cooperate. I think this is the fundament that connects both anthropology and anarchism, but also us and our relationship with the other commissions. So it's more like an invitation, and we accept to like establish a dialogue with Giovanna's commission. Thank you, Giovanna, for your.
I've lost your I've lost your image, but can you say something about that? Are you there? Yeah, Nori?
Oh, sorry, I had to go to the bathroom. Yeah, it's very hard to answer this question because I'm actually also in the same problem. As a postdoc, I'm inside of this protocol that I have to produce more and more and more. Super neoliberal scheme that, however, as I see in Mexico, there's more need to make the classes by ethnographic basis. That we have to go more to the places that we want to investigate. There's not so much time to be there, and I think this is the orientation that must change so that we can actually understand the dynamics of the communities that I think will be the help to understand the orientation of anthropological anarchist anthropology. And maybe we should make more like assemblies inside the class. However, these things I want to do, but also in the problem that is like Japan, I cannot find easily the answer to these, like how we can manage to do so.
Thanks. No, I can't either, but Monksy, I think you have the last word.
Thank you very much.
Don't say you're too old. Please don't say you're too
old. For this one, I'm not too old.
Okay.
I'd like to have a much longer discussion with you about this. In an earlier version, which was even longer of what I was going to say today, I wanted to talk about a particular form of schooling, and we're talking about primary and high schooling, where there is a consensual model among teachers. It's fundamental to the system. It's normally known, and you probably would know it because of your position in the education field, as Rudolf Steiner education, where it's a fundamental principle. Doesn't always work. It's very much incomplete autonomy. It doesn't always work very well. And along with that is also centralizing the student, the scholar, the child, whatever you want to call the person, the learner, for the teacher having to deal with each child in their classroom, imagine their needs and try and deliver for them rather than to stick to something which comes from outside and is a curriculum. It's also, again, there's a tension, but I'm happy to talk quite a lot about that. And maybe that would be a link between the two commissions, although my role has been in the other commission, of which I'm still the co-chair, although I'm slowly finding myself moving away from that.
Virginia, just can I make like one last comment about utopia and the role of utopia in social theory and political movement? It's just because utopia's role for anything and anyone, it's to be incomplete. That's why autonomies, I almost can say that the anarchists might complain, but that they are always incomplete, because the role of utopia is never to become real. It's an horizon of hope and political action. So if we try to make our spaces that don't replicate those relations of oppression, and it's already like a lot is a way towards like finding the response, the practical, always based on experiences of people's real experiences in lives, to those questions. And they are always open, and that's utopia. And that's good. And that's not bad. I think it's needed too.
Okay. Cassio wrote a very long chat message. I guess I could have him read it and you guys respond, or you could all just read it. Betty, what do you think?
I think we can just read it.
Okay, all right. Muggsy, are you raising your hand? Are you talking to somebody? You're muted, so if you're talking, I can't see. I can't hear. Muggsy? No? Okay.
I wasn't meaning to talk.
Oh, okay. All right. Anyway, it's now almost top of the hour. So I guess I would like to thank you all, Betty, Muggsy, Nori, and I see Mabruk, Giovanna. Tian, I should have mentioned this. Tian is our communications director, and most things that go well like this, I think, are his doing. So, yeah, there you go. Okay, thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Gracias.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Obrigado.
Gracias, obrigado.
Bye. Thank you. Asante sana.
Arigatos.
Arigatou gozaimasu.